let's dive into it, and then we can, if we see that we just don't need the full time, we'll cut the meeting short. Why don't we start with the Sampo mission? And Acid Laser, can you read this? Can you see that? Maybe you can just read that
Yeah,
out.
sure. Okay. So the Sampo working group develops and grows the value of the economic layer on the token engineering commons. It aligns the microeconomy with the TEC mission and the collective success and individual benefit of its token holders.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. So I thought that today one of the things, and it's interesting because we just kind of got off of a call that was where we were talking about some of this stuff already. So it's kind of interesting that like this was, I didn't write this just now. This was something I wrote yesterday. The check-in question that I wanted to just start with is, in your view, what are the biggest challenges currently facing the TEC? So that's it's a very timely topic right now. So why don't does anybody feel compelled to go first? Does anybody have I'll jump into it. If not,
I can do it.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thanks, Acid.
In my opinion, I think that people and contributors are not 100% involved in what's happening right now. I think many people have gone and not come back. Yeah, maybe that's one problem I see.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and I'll pass it to Bear.
Yeah, thank you, Asid. Yeah, I guess probably related to what you're saying. I think the structure of the whole DAO, that's probably one of the biggest challenges we have, and that we should prioritize, because from that then we can start building with more clarity the next stages of the work we want to do. So yeah, I would say that. I'll pass it to you, Nate.
Yeah, vision. We have to have a vision in terms of where we're heading. I think it's the most vital aspect of it all. I think everything else falls into place after we articulate a clear vision for the community. We had the working groups. I agree with what Bear had said. The structure of the whole DAO is really, really important. I think that, working groups in general in most DAOs suffer from isolation, and they are not an integral part of like the social program of the community. And I do think that is something that we really need to address if we're going to organize ourselves and maybe find new avenues of organizing ourselves in the structure. So I think that is a huge deal. So vision and structure are really, really important. I'll pass it to you, Gideon.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I think these are all right on, and I think that they're all related. Like to me, it feels like the structure of the DAO was overcomplicated. It's like too much structure, right? Too many working groups, and it kind of created a little bureaucracy, and it's a bureaucracy with no hierarchy. So it's natural that the pieces don't really talk to each other that much. And so that's one problem. And then the pieces, not only are they not talking to each other, but they don't have a shared vision other than the MVV, but the MVV wasn't really actionable, right? Because there wasn't a common strategy. So that resulted in like just things kind of going in lots of different directions without it necessarily creating value for the stakeholders. And so then the stakeholders basically stopped showing up, and then when the stakeholders stopped showing up, our chances of being able to replenish the funding pool started to drop precipitously because people lost faith in the TEC. We were actually building something that creates value for the field of token engineering. And so then, like people kind of lose faith, they sell the token, and then we start getting scared about the common pool drying up, and then we have to start cutting funds, and then or like slowing spending, and then a lot of the people who were here just primarily for economic reasons, they are the first people to drop off, and then it just starts to kind of like feel not great, right? Because it feels like things are slowing down or maybe winding down. So I think that like our challenge right now is to turn this thing around, like get this spinning the other direction. And I think that that starts with creating real value to the actual stakeholders. And I think that also relates to vision. Like if you look at the great companies out there, that they started with like a pretty clear vision. Like Amazon, like we've seen these companies kind of get corrupted along the way, but Amazon, Google, even Facebook, they started with like a clear vision of how they wanted to serve. So I was going to try to focus the conversation on the curation service and getting the incentives right for participating in that, but I don't know. I'm feeling like it might be worth sharing a vision with you all right now. Just I don't know, because it just feels like we're kind of short on that right now, and it would be great to get some feedback on it and maybe just start a little conversation around it. So what do you guys think about changing this agenda and talking about vision for a little bit?
I'm done with that.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. Really good.
Yeah, see.
Okay. Okay, so let me find this.
And is this regarding the TEC in general, or Sampo specifically, or?
This is TEC in general. Hold on just one second. Let me pull up these slides. Okay. So, I've been thinking a lot about this organization, this economy, commons, and why of all the things I could be doing, I'm almost 60 years old, so I'm kind of I'm way older than you guys. I've done lots of things, like I could be just resting right now, but I'm not. I'm plugging in here because I actually do believe that if we don't do something as a society right now, the next generations are going to be really screwed, and the Earth is going to be really screwed. I mean, this is like, I've spent a lot of my life actually like working on the environment, and I just saw that I worked with a lot of nonprofits, and they would make advances in passing certain laws, and then a year or two would go by, and then the business community would come and unwind it. They'd just spend money and influence the laws and change the laws back to the way they wanted it. And I was like, this is just, we're living in a broken economy. And so to me, I feel like this field of the basically blockchain technology, and in specific the token engineering, I think is like the future fabric of the economy. So that thing that's in quotes there is really, that's just me. Like, it's just a placeholder. So like, don't get attached to that. But for me personally, I see it as that's what the stakes are. Like, we have a chance to rewrite the rules, the code within the code of our economy, so I see the token engineering commons as like a huge lever for creating a new type of economy. I think that the Common Stack team actually had a really powerful vision of setting this up as a commons. And I think it's really important for us to be clear about what David Bolia has this great definition in his book called Being a Commoner or something like that. He says that a commons is a common pool resource stewarded by a community based upon agreed upon protocols. And so, I'm just trying to simplify things down and saying, like, what is that resource? Well, I think it's token engineering expertise. That's the resource at the center of this community. And we have a community that we're trying to build up, steward that resource through some agreed upon protocols. We basically launched with this vision of a microeconomy to build that and build and steward that commons. Did all this work around the social layer and the governance layer. Like, actually pretty groundbreaking work. But by itself, it became bureaucratic because we didn't have this top layer figured out, which was basically the way that we build the economy. Because the economy, I think, is like, that's the key to actually building the value. As a result, with no economic development plan, there's no way of replenishing the common pool, and so we just see it just shrinking over time, which is not good, right? So we all know this. Like, we know that this is at the root of the problem, and if we don't do something, this will just dwindle down to zero, and we will have blown a huge opportunity to help civilization. So the vision that I keep coming back to, I just see it all the time in my head, and like, this feels so strong to me, like, is this, which is seeing token engineering as a tree. Basically, you've got the roots, which are research, and research, like, if you ever see that token economic flower, it has like all of the research areas that feed into this field, right? But rather than seeing it as a flower, maybe these are roots that then like feed the nutrients of basic research into this field of token engineering. And then you've got education, which is like how you pass that research and expertise from that layer up into the field, right? You're training people, you're embedding that expertise in people. And this top layer, the canopy of the tree, is really the solutions and the applications, like what we actually do with those with the research and then the knowledge that's been transferred to people to actually solve problems. So there's just really a couple more slides here, but I wanted to just share this with you guys. The old model of technology innovation was one where you have like governments funding the basic research and even a lot of the education. But the problem is that in those models, you can have like a Pfizer or a Microsoft or a Boeing or whoever can come along and say, hey, thanks for all that basic research and thanks for educating all of these engineers. This is awesome. Like, We didn't have to train those people. We didn't have to do that research ourselves. Now we can just build the tools and the solutions, and we can make a shit ton of money off of this. This is great, right? So what happens is over time, and you can see this in the United States, like all this stuff starts to dry up. This stuff here, the basic research starts to dry up. The education basically kind of goes to, people who can afford it. There are some differences. Like we have scholarships and things like that, but fundamentally, like it's becoming increasingly expensive. So this whole thing is starting to wither in the United States. This is part of the problem we have. So what I'm trying to figure out here is like, is there a way where we can create a closed loop system here, a commons, where the money, the sunlight, the energy that's coming into this canopy, right, basically creates, through photosynthesis, it creates energy that can go through capillaries down into the trunk and into the roots, so that it's a closed loop, and so that all this money that's resting on top of all this work down here gets recycled. So I think that what's happening is that we've got this, the Token Engineering Academy actually is ramping up and is doing they're doing a good job. But what's missing is this canopy layer, like a way of organizing the canopy solutions layer of the token engineering field. And so that I think is a really good opportunity for the TEC to focus on. So what is, if you think about who's in these things, we know that researchers and teachers and students are in the roots and trunk, but the canopy is made up of all kinds of players, right? You've got the people who are actually doing the work, individual consultants, consulting firms, practitioners, people who know how to do governance, know how to do dispute resolution in this kind of DAO, decentralized world. All of these people who are critical to deploying these solutions. And then you've got all the people who could end up using this, right? Corporations, nonprofits, government agencies, communities, but then also individuals like social activists, enthusiasts, policymakers. And this is just touching the surface. So I'm going to stop here. There are a lot more to these slides that someday maybe we can go into. But I'm just going to stop here because I think that there's a great opportunity for us to really focus on being two things. One is serving as a community that attracts that solutions layer. And then also an economy that recycles the wealth, the money that's coming in from the solution layers back into the research and the education. So I'm going to stop there and just get some thoughts, feedback from.
Yeah, I agree with that vision a lot. I've been thinking about this for months now, and it's one of those things where when I think about articulating a vision, I really think we should really lean into our strengths. And one of our strengths right now in the TEC is that we are the best positioned to become an authoritative voice within this industry in general. There are a lot of, there's this interesting balance between, self-regulation and compliance with government regulation within this industry, and it's a huge, huge issue. It has been the Wild West traditionally for the last 5 years or so within just crypto. And I think that is a huge barrier to mass adoption. And there are certain fundamental aspects that are concerning to me. I think of security audits. I think of smart contract development. I think about these vulnerabilities that we have in code bases, and how we have these kind of copycat codes that just pop up, and you just have forks of forks of forks of forks. And it's a very dangerous place to be for a lot of people who are traditionally trying to participate. And if we want to have an economic system based off of this technology, we need to have set, good examples, established standards. And I think that, we are in a very good position. Like, I don't know of any other organization that is even close to being able to aggregate voices of authority on these particular subjects. And that's why this concept of the interest groups is really interesting to me, because we do have people who have been in the industry for a long time associated with the token engineering commons. You think of Trent and Paul Haas. We think about Griff. These people, they have a network of individuals who have been in this game for a very, very long time, and who have a lot of authoritative voice in shaping the future of how this works. And so when it comes to the interest groups, I think it would be really, really interesting to start becoming and leaning into that advantageous position that we're in, and say, hey, let's get these people who are really great at let's get all the people who have projects that are associated with security audits, get them together. What does the standard audit look like? How do we make it more affordable? Let's start facilitating conversations around really important topics that affect the entire industry, and having that in a public space, maybe even in our Discord. And this kind of comes with that whole Shelling Point narrative, where we can say, hey, these are the conversations that we're having. And underneath that conversation, we can invite the entire token engineering community, the entire crypto community, to come to learn, to actually get a kind of a common voice towards self-regulation and moving this industry forward. And so I really think that this is we do have a unique opportunity, this kind of first mover advantage, to actually become an authoritative voice within this industry. And so I would really like to, I think when it comes down to it, it's the authoritative voice and the economic layer. And at the end of the day, like, the reason I'm still here is because I have conviction about the foundations of what the ABC can do at scale. I do think that when we have enough economic velocity going through the ABC, and we are able to generate funds for the common pool, we will be able to do a lot of amazing things with that money. And I think that this is a great foundation for us. And I think we just need to develop it. And it may take a little bit longer than necessary. I think one of the biggest issues we had was we needed that big community to initialize this economy. And now that we had that big community, we didn't know what to do with it next. And because the economic layer does take time to develop, and I mean multiple years to develop. And so as it starts to develop back again, we'll start to grow the community again. And we will have this kind of foundation of the cultural build, the things that we've learned with our working groups, what worked, what didn't. And we can start this to responsibly expand avenues in our organizational structure. And so I do think that the interest groups are an integral part of utilizing that authoritative voice and being that Shelling Point. I think we have to get the right people in the room, and I think we need to have it structured in a way that we create utility for the TEC token in the process. And I do see us becoming a focal point, this kind of this pivot point to where everything revolves around the knowledge and conversations that are happening within the token engineering commons. And so that's my big vision for it. And, it's very similar to conversations that I've had way long ago about the IEEE and using that as kind of a foundational model, but expanding on it, and using our economic layer to actually direct this industry into the right direction, so we can have mass adoption, so we can start to say, hey, we're just seeing this being picked up all over the world, and people are not afraid of it anymore, not getting scammed all the time. And yeah, that's my personal vision for it. I do think the authoritative voice is a huge incremental part of that. So I'll just keep it at that.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Yeah. I I think that the key, so all of that resonates with me. I think all of that, and I think the key is right now. I feel like when we launched, um, we had that opportunity to do that right away. Like there was a lot of excitement, and then we kind of like took our eye off the ball for a little bit and got a little bit too focused internally. And so now we're gonna have to work to build that authority, or I wouldn't even say authority because we don't. It's like maybe it's not we are the authority. It's we are community organizing the authority. Like the authority is all these people we want to pull in, um, and so the job now is community organizing. Like how do we get people to believe again that this is a place that's spending time in? And I think if we can do that, then a lot of that stuff that you're talking about, Nate, possible. Yeah. Does anybody else have thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, not 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 much to add. To be honest, I think I also really resonate with what you showed in the presentation, Gideon, and with what you're saying, Nate. I think there's a lot of opportunity, and something that really motivates me and keeps me excited is that slowly I think we are taking some steps into the right direction. You know, I think when I just joined the TEC, and all the way until a couple of weeks or months ago, I really had a hard time trying to create this vision of the TEC in my mind. You know, for me it was really hard to think, you know, like what is a common? How does a commons look like in a digital space? You know, how do we allocate these funds? You know, how do we organize around token engineering? How do we do it in a way that is decentralized and that it also aligns to the Ostron's principles? You know, it was like many questions that didn't really seem to have uh, like a closing point in which they all converged and actually generated a clear vision to me of the TEC. But recently, I think thanks to the conversations and to the ideas and to the visions that people have been sharing in the space, I think I'm finally realizing it, and for me, it's getting more clear every time, and that just makes me super happy and super excited because um, yeah, I just feel it looks more achievable and more possible to do, you know. And then if we think about like the fundamental reasons why we are all here, you know, that I think basically is to help the world, yeah, make it a better place. I think that's just like another extra layer of excitement, right? So yeah, I mean, I also think it's really wise the example you give with the tree and just like taking the time to look at nature and like to actual systems that they've always been there and they've always been working perfectly, and try to kind of like bring that knowledge and that wisdom into what we're doing with all of this technology and with all of this way in which we want to organize ourselves as humans, and to organize the knowledge and the expertise that we have. I think it's really important to take nature as a reference, uh, and I think if we do that, I think that the chances of us being successful increase radically. And also, I really resonated with what Nate was saying about this authority thing. Yeah, it's also some kind of like reputation that the TEC has, that I feel it's just like another benefit that the community has, another opportunity, another door that is open that it's super interesting for me, because like sometimes I go to another Discord server, and I talk a little bit about the TEC, and everyone that I've met, actually, they say, oh yes, the TEC, like, big fan of your work, guys. Like, it's like they already know, they've heard at least of the TEC, and at least for what I felt, they have like a good impression of that. So if we already have that kind of reputation and authority in the space, I think the only option we have is just to keep that on a good standard, and just like build on that, and improve it, and become this place of an action shielding point with with responsible practices, uh, with all of these pieces that we want to put together to make this a good commons, right? So yeah, I with all of this, I only see like doors of opportunity everywhere, and it's just really really exciting. And this idea of having the TEC not work as a company, we're not a company, we're not an organization, but we're a DAO, but we are a commons. And the way I like to see it, and that Gideon said this to me, and that for me now it makes a lot of sense, is this idea of a social network, right? And it's not like Facebook or Twitter, like social media strictly, but it's an actual network of people, of projects, of initiatives that we want to build around, and then have all of these services or protocols or things that we can provide to these people as support for achieving their what they're looking for, right? So just finding the way to organize ourselves in how to operate this in the best possible way. I think that's the moment where we are right now, trying to figure that out. But I think once we do it, I think it's all full potential that we have here. So super super exciting. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Bear. Yeah, I think, it's because I think a lot of us have been kind of feeling the deflated energy of the TEC over the last month, right? And so, I mean, personally, what my experience has been, I'm just going to be very real here. My experience has been that the highlights of my week have been on the Sampo calls. It just feels like there's just a lot of energy, and like there's hope, right? Because I think there is this exciting thing that we're all kind of like starting to see. It's but then there's just also kind of like some of the other calls. It feels like, oh gosh, we got, I don't know, it just feels stuck. And the last call we were on, and actually a number of the calls over this last couple of weeks, you can feel kind of the weight on people's shoulders right now. So shoulders, not shoulder. I think that part of what we've got to do right now is turn the energy around, and so I do believe that starts with vision and excitement around, like, not just kind of a blank, like a high level MVV, but like, how are we going to actually fulfill that MVV? What is our unique value add? What is the value that we're creating? That feels very important to me, because that's where it gets very exciting to actually start building. Acid, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I was going to say that I'm really agree with Bear. When I came to TEC, well, it was my very first Web3 DAO experience. I was really confused, and I got too many months to understand the TEC mission and vision. When I start, I was just collaborating and doing contributions and attending to calls, but I never was too much into what does TEC do. And at this moment, I'm feeling very into TC. After more than a year, I feel like I believed in this project. I believe to our mission, and the only thing that I want to do is to contribute to have a better community. But yeah, I agree with where that the biggest I don't know how to say it, but it requires time to understand TC, and maybe that's one of the problems that's why people it's gone, because it requires time and enter to the calls, trying to understand what are we doing and what we want to do. And maybe people it's not too related to that and just want that everything is it's done already. But yeah, I agree with all of you guys, and I want to say that Gideon, that presentation is really good, yeah. And the illustrations and all that stuff is really good. And also, I like the part when you said that the end of the tree is T Academy. That's really true, and the top is something that we need to structure together to get like a final objective of what are we trying to do in this field of token engineering. And yeah, hope we can find a solution for that. And yeah, that's all I can say about it. I really agree with you guys.
Thanks, Acid. Yeah, I so I think one of the challenges that we've been facing is because we've had these like 2 months, 2.5 months of time where we couldn't really coordinate with the academy, and yet like if you believe that vision of the commons actually being the full tree, not just the canopy, but it's the full tree, then you can see that the academy is like an essential part of this. Like it truly is essential, and in fact, actually, like in some ways, like those are the uh, public goods. But I actually even kind of think of it as like common good. It's like things that we want the commons to support, and figuring out how to create a closed loop system. I think that's like a um, really powerful opportunity, right? And I think, but what that does is it shows you like some of the frustration about not being able to move forward until we have these conversations with the academy. Like, I think what's interesting about that vision of the tree is that you can see, yeah, it kind of doesn't even make sense to move. Like, we can make some progress in like defining, oh, this canopy could kind of look like this. Like, hey, like these are things that we think could be important to attracting, you know, the people who are building the solutions, um, and then the people who are using the solutions. Like, that's, we think these are some of the ways that we could do that. Curation services might be one, but like there are going to be a lot more services, and but like aligning them with the academy will be important. And I'm going to give a concrete example of this. I think some of you have heard me say this, but the curation service, if we do this right, it won't just be running in our server, it'll be running in other servers, including the academy, but also Tokenomics DAO. They're very interested in it, and I'll bet others will be as well. I think the DeFi safety guys are interested in it too. And the idea would be that the backend database, all of the content that's curated, we would not just curate that in our Discord. There's like a backend that would tie together all these other Discords, all these other communities, and try to come up with a unified schema, a unified set of categories for talking about things. That becomes super powerful, not just for like sharing knowledge across the field, but for connecting people, right? And so what that might mean is if you're like somebody who is an implementer, you're building tools, you're offering services around safety audits for token engineering systems. Sure, you're gonna like want to come into, you're gonna want to see all the stuff that's going on in the engineering common Discord server about how people are applying that. You know, what solutions people are building and like staying up on all that stuff. But also, like if you go into the back end to the curated feed, which might be a token gated service, that requires that you have the TEC in your wallet. You could see like classes that are being offered. You could see research that's being done in the field of safety. And it's all kind of a unified thing. And you could also then use that as a way to traverse your shared interests with other people, right? To find the researchers, to find the teachers, to find the, you know, whatever it is around the thing that you're interested in your interest group. Yeah. And I want to share one other thing about the services and like the nature of the services economically, like what these actually are. But before I do that, I just want to make some space. Any thoughts, any other things, or I can dive into the next thing if you want.
Yeah, I think you can dive in.
Okay, so one of the things that is becoming increasingly clear to me is that whatever organizational structure we end up with in the TEC to kind of like refocus ourselves, that there are going to be these services like the curation service. And I think that originally when I started this, I kind of was seeing this in the not quite the right way. Like, it's like, oh no, this is a service that's run by the TEC, you know, being built by the TEC. But the reality is actually that the curation service is actually, you know, the truth is it's being built by third party, you know, the Common Sense team. And we want to partner with them in helping them to shape that vision so that it can serve not just the Discord server, but the field, right? Like the full commons. And so in that sense, you know, I think what we need to do is shift the relationship and the way that we think about that service to more of like a kind of traditional project that we might fund coming through the common pool, right? That it's like these guys came to us. They didn't actually ask for money initially, right? Though I think that we probably should fund their development. But I think that what we need to do forward is to come up with like an economic framework that says like, hey, if you get funded by the TEC, and you're doing like public goods, those are grants. You know, we don't have like, there's not a lot of expectations other than reporting back how you're using that. But if the things we're investing in have the potential to actually earn money, to create value, utility, stakeholder utility, then there's a harness that comes with these funds. And that harness means that wealth that you generate from this investment of the commons, some portion of it needs to come back into the commons. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. So, you know, that could take many forms, right? It could be that the TEC gets a stake and, you know, gets to hold a portion of the shares or ownership of whatever that service is. It could be that, like in the case of the curation service, what I'm recommending to common sense folks is that, at least within the field of token engineering, that whatever we're doing is denominated in TEC, right? So like if you want access to, if you're in the field of token engineering, and you want to access that curated feed, you're holding TEC, right? So it's like it requires that whoever is getting funded for those kinds of investment, and they're not grants, they're investment, then the stipulation is that you will become part of the economy, and you will feed back wealth into the commons so that it can be recycled. And there's a lot of work that we have to do to figure out what will that harness like, what will that governing, those governing principles look like, economic governance principles. But I think that that's probably a healthier way of thinking about these kinds of services. Is, particularly, it's not just money that we're putting in this one. We're putting a lot more than money. I mean, we're putting like, a lot of resources, people's time, people who are being paid by the commons, on our budgets, our working group budgets, to spend time on this. And so in this case in particular, like when we're doing a lot of work to shape the service, then it comes with some other, like some other conditions. And I think that's part of what we need to talk about with the commons. So I've already kind of like in that direction, but you can see that, and I think that there's a similar kind of thing that we can do even with Gravity DAO, like to help them to spin off in a healthy way where they can actually succeed, but then they can also give back to the common. Okay. Stop. End of rant.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I think if we look at our funding from two perspectives, the one where it's like, okay, they're trying to tokenize, they're trying to make some money. I think, yeah, we for sure have to go that route where we have that harness and making sure that something is being generated for the commons. And then the other aspect is the common pool, where it's like the grant, like if you're a nonprofit or you're trying to advance something that's within our broad mission, and we find that we want to fund you, I think that that can be looked at as a grant. But with that being said, I really something I've been putting a lot of thought into was the barriers on the common pool for that particular type of funding. I think that it'd be really interesting to see, depending on how these interest groups develop, if we could have these kind of committees and boards with these different areas where they highlight, where we give them the power. Maybe we have an interest group and there's 5 or 6 individuals who can make up a board that is in charge of that niche area of token engineering, that can actually be responsible for making proposals, and we limit the proposals for the grant making style of funding, limited to those individuals and to those groups. And that way we kind of have this barrier on who can access the common pool for those types of functions. And then of course we have the internal aspect of it, which largely should be minimal, but it's worth noting. So I really do think that those 3 areas of how we can distinguish the 3 areas of funding by those 3: the operations, the for-profit, and the nonprofit. And I think the nonprofit, the grant style, needs to have barriers and conditions associated with it as well. Not the financial harness, but some other type of filter, to where we know that the projects that are being funded for the nonprofit are going to a cause that the people who are in the commons, the interest groups that are controlling it, find valuable or see as valuable moving into the future.
That's really interesting. I encourage everybody to look up on the TC forum. Nate has commented on this. Solstice actually had some interesting ideas, and we're jamming on like what the future of the common pool might look like. And actually, Nate, like said kind of like got me thinking too. Like, if you do think of, that one of the resources that we're building here is token engineering. I mean, the core resource at the heart of this commons is token engineering expertise. And that is what NT has said several times in the past, that would be very useful for the Ethereum Foundation to like be able to come to us and say like, hey, we know you guys have a lot of expertise around token engineering. Help us to spend our funds. Here's $1 million. Here's $1 million DAI, right? Spend this well. Use the wisdom of the community. Spend this well. And so, Nate, what you were talking about with interest groups, like, actually, if you start to see the interest groups and the schema that we're building around categories as restricted grants, right? These are like, if you want to come to the TEC and like designate that you want funding to go to like safety. Let's say you got ripped off, right? By you fell for one of these scams or a system that was just poorly designed, like, and you're like, I'm going to put 20K or 200K into this field, and I want you guys to figure out. I don't know what's the best way to solve this problem, but here's like a bunch of people who have expertise in safety. Help me figure out how to spend this. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, and really and I think the core point here is that we get more expertise involved in the decision making of what becomes funded. I as much as I'd like to say that the trusted seed and the members who started this economy, everybody who's participated is great, but it doesn't mean everyone has the insight to know what is best for the industry moving forward. And so even if they're not TEC token holders, but they're experts in their field and they have insight, I think having that expertise at the beginning, when having them control the narrative of what enters the common pool as a proposal, having that expertise going, this is what we need, and having them decide exactly what is the priority instead of us, because I don't think we can set those priorities. I'm not an expert in audits or smart contract development. So for me to vote in support of one proposal over another within the conviction voting module, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And so I think introducing experts into that participation is really, really critical.
Just to add on to all of this conversation, something that I think that will also be really important to take care of is of this idea of becoming really good in observation of the different dynamics and movements that start happening within the interest groups. Either this is because of the different projects or initiatives that could come up from them that we need to pay attention to, or the people and the expertise, right? I think one part of this is to attract the expertise that is currently not in the TEC, but then it will also have to do with how do we make those people remain in the TEC and start building from that in a organic way, and then being really good at observing those dynamics in order to even to start creating these funding frameworks that we're talking about, to do it more instead of based on assumptions that we can think of, more in the actual dynamics that start happening in the interest groups and within the community. I think that will be key.
I think you tapped onto something really important there. Because imagine we have like a round table of the top experts in a particular field, and we have during that round table you have a lot of people who are interested in that field coming to listen to their conversation. And what's really important, I think that you tapped on there, is how do we cultivate that interest group, those people who are interested in learning more about this topic or helping to progress that topic, to actually participate in progressing that topic, and using, whether it's our Discord channel or whatever it may be, to actually coordinate with each other to create initiatives underneath it, guided by those experts, and how we can cultivate that type of community and start on the ground, ground floor with particular interests.
Yeah, I think that there's like a whole set of services we could actually build around that. Like Polis is, it's basically it's looking at people's sentiment around particular topics. So it's really good for building consensus around things. And that's one of the challenges of having like industry trade associations. I used to work for one for like 4 or 5 years, and building that kind of like, because people have competing interests, right? So like coming up with good tools for building consensus. And then also, I think actually our work with Clarity, not that we would open Clarity up to these partners because it's too complicated, but I think that the expertise that we're building in Clarity would be really good for being able to move projects along and keep them organized on behalf of groups. Like help them to organize them and make progress. Folks, I think that so we have just 1 minute left, and I think we should so we're at the top of the hour, so we should wind this up. But if you would like to, we can have this be a topic for like a larger group next week. What do you guys think? Focus on interest groups?
For sure.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
Like identifying interest groups and identifying the experts in those fields are really important to start looking at. So if you have an interest group in mind, I'd say like think about the experts in that field that you think are really important, and just say, hey, even if they're huge, like if it's Vitalik, fine, let's at least send the offer,
So one thing I'll share just as closing is I would encourage you all to think about the curation service as an incubator for interest groups. Because if we can't get people to engage in like just having conversation in those threads on the forum around a particular topic, it's unlikely that the interest group will sustain itself. So I think that using the curation service as a way to start to build engagement and interest in like excitement around a particular category will be like a natural stepping stone to incubating an interest group. So if you can be thinking about that for next week, I think that would be really helpful to be able to really, like think big, but then also think very pragmatically about like how we actually start these. Who are the people? What level of expertise do we want in here? What can we actually expect in terms of people spending time? So let's do it. We'll have that be a topic for next week. All right, guys. I am heading up to Canada, so everybody have a good week, rest of your week, and good weekend. We'll talk next week.
Have fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Gideon. Have a good trip. Thank you, everyone.